The following is a fan-based review. All materials discussed are property of Toei Inc., Bandai, and Saban Entertainment.
Hello everybody, and welcome to a new Tokucast show.
New
show.
Did it.
We're going to call this Tokucast A Decade in Review, and we
Yes.
don't mean Kamen Rider Decade.
No. It'll be fun when we get to him, though. He'll be back. This time, we're going to be doing it from 1990 to 1999 for Super Sentai.
Just kind of talk about, how the decade of these Sentai seasons went. Did it end on a good note? Did it start on a good note? All that good stuff. Just kind of go over this, because we finally reviewed an entire decade of Sentai consecutively.
Mostly. We didn't end up doing this for the 80s because we could not review most of them. We did a few shows for the 80s.
As opposed to this one where we only missed one.
Yes. We'll talk about that now, actually. Let's go ahead and get started.
1990, Chiku Sentai 5 Mans.
Terrible. Show is bad. It's boring. The suits are great. I like some of the characters, but otherwise,
Haven't seen it.
it's not that good.
Next is Chojin Sentai Jetman.
1991. Great.
Very good show.
I feel like the 90s especially were a very, very transformative time.
A lot of new traditions began in the 90s.
Yes. A lot of things ended up happening. It's just like, we finally got our Six Ranger with the next show. With Jetman, we got a romance that worked because previously we had Masked Man. We all saw how that one went terribly.
Moving on. Next is Kyoryu Sentai Zyuranger.
Hated this opening.
Yeah.
But
overall, wasn't a terrible show. It was just...
yeah, the biggest problem with this show, and we said this in our review of Zyuranger, is what it comes after and what it comes before.
It's just not fair to it.
Yeah, it's really, really not fair to Zyuranger in itself. It's
But
just
it
like you go from really being really scientific and really focusing on the drama and the romance to something that's really more kid-focused, and that doesn't help this show really at all. But we do end up getting our first Six Ranger
and
officially.
Our first Power Rangers.
Yes, and our first Power Rangers, of course, from this one. But in this one, we end up getting Dragon Ranger, our first Six Ranger, which sets up the precedent for basically every other season that comes after it, bar Go-Go 5.
Which we will get to.
Yeah, but it's not a bad show, but you can tell exactly where it went down.
Next is Gosei Sentai Dairanger. One of the greatest.
Great show.
It's definitely it's in my top Sentai.
Yeah, it really, really is. Just like, it really, really went back to the martial arts in this one. And they made it the show about martial arts.
And the characters.
And a lot of the out-suit fighting, and really about the characters again, because...
And who could forget Kujaku?
Taibo!
Kujaku!
And it's just like everybody had their own arc. Kazu got tied into the Turtles. But it was still really, really good. It's like Dairanger is the one that, out of most of the ones that when people ask, where do I start with Super Sentai, I'm just like, go to this. Just like, start with this.
Yeah.
The ending. Yeah. But up to that point, it was still really...
Yeah, that last episode was not a good note.
No, it was not. But it was still really, really good. It's like it had such a strong, sees a strong starting out point. It's just like there were no real fillers in this show, and that really ended up helping it. As we talked about in another Toba Talk before, serialization really ends up helping it. The fact that they end up having characters, go away or come back, like Kujaku or the Three Stooges, something like that. And even though we don't really like in Ko and his storyline, it wasn't that bad.
Ko!
In comparison to some of the other ones.
Yeah. Next is Ninja Sentai Kaku Ranger.
I still like Kaku Ranger. Don't like it as much on second watch, but there are still a lot of things I like about it. It's very comic book-ish at the very beginning, with all the sound effects coming out, like Zabak and Slash and Throw and Shoo and things like that.
And Hexade.
I liked the wackiness of it, but when it got serious, when it really started to focus on Tsuruhime and her father and the Flower Kunoichi team and Sasuke's fight against them in that one episode, it was really good, especially because this is the first time that one, we got a female leader, and two, it really focused on her. But we got a female in a Sentai who wasn't just the girl or the love interest. And I think that's what really made me like this show so much, in itself just because of Tsuruhime and the fact that she is that strong woman who legitimately did not need no man. And that made her great. I really liked what they did with her character, and it really just made her feel so much stronger.
Next,
a mess.
Choriki Sentai, O-Ranger.
With those two with terrorist attack and the earthquake that happened at the beginning, it's just like, why? It was really, really, really messy. Like, that entire show was messy. And that's not good. It's just like it kept jumping back and forth between tone and the characters really, really did not matter. The only ones I even really remember, and this is because they show up in Gokaiger, is red and pink. And other than that, it's just like, there are things that could have been a lot better in this show. Because you can see, like, those first 8 episodes, like, watch those and stop. Don't even watch anything else in this show.
Next, Gekiso Sentai, Ka-Ranger.
The first one where it's just a pure comedy.
Which, it worked in cases.
I loved it. I love the show so much.
That's alright.
It cracked me up just so often, just because these people were assholes and they knew they were assholes. So they're just like, this is exactly how a comedy show should work. You know, parody Turbo Ranger, which is also not a good show. I watched the first 10 episodes. Just kill me now. But it itself was still really, really funny. I enjoyed the characters. I enjoyed the situations that they got into. I enjoyed the amount of bullshit that is constantly running into. And I enjoyed, even though, like, their characters are selfish, but they're really funny with their selfishness. I remember that in the Mega Ranger Car Ranger team up where they had that monster that could grant wishes, and he wished for a giant thing of ramen. I was just like,
why? Next is Denji Sentai, Mega Ranger.
We love this show.
We do.
This show is,
in my opinion, out of this decade, best suits.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think I put Go-Go 5 in them on about the same year.
Fair enough. Because of the uniformity. Mega
Ranger was just like coming off of Car Ranger, which is so comedy focused. Like, yeah, there were still comedic moments in this show, and it felt really natural. I think it's because of the fact that, you know, they're all teenagers, and I believe they're all around that age, so it actually felt, you know, a lot more genuine, natural and genuine in this actual show itself. I think that's the thing that really ended up helping it, and that's, you know, it was just really well written. Even though this isn't the first time that we got an evil Sentai team, because as I said earlier with Kaku Ranger, we had the Flower Kunoichi team. But in this one, the Neji Rangers felt like so much more of a threat because they didn't answer to anybody. The Flower Kunoichi team were constantly under Junior or, you know, his dad. But then we ended up getting to the Neji Rangers, and yeah, they were originally under Dr. Hindelar, but after that, you're just like, okay, but fuck you though. So they just left.
But fuck you though.
And I really like the way that, you know, this show ends up working. That ending still gets to me. And as I said in the show, it's like I was graduating at the same time they finished subbing this. So it's just like it really worked itself out for me, especially. It's like that one hits me in the feels. And I like that fact.
Yeah.
Like Mega Ranger was a really, really good show when it got to the actual story because as we said earlier, there's a lot of filler in this. But once it gets to that story, it just goes at 100 and just stays that way. I love Mega Ranger. It's a great show, and it's one of the highlights, really not just of Sentai, like of this decade, but really just Sentai as a whole. I put it up there as one of my favorites.
Next one, not so much. Kinga Man.
I did not like this show.
Boring, slow.
It was just, it was really boring. That ending, I didn't mind it. I understand where people were coming from. It was a mess, but it was still not bad. There are some things where
it's not the worst, but it definitely wasn't.
It felt like it just took way too long to get into itself. And that's not necessarily a good thing. But, you know, we don't like the suits. We don't like the mechs. At least like the first one. Bull Black still looks fine and everything. But it felt sort of like a step back from Mega Ranger. Because I didn't care about any of these characters. And I cared about all the characters in Mega Ranger. But like going to Kinga Man, it's just like, it felt like a step down. And yeah, that's not the best way to just come off such a good season that Mega Ranger was.
Yeah. And finally, QQ Sentai, Go-Go 5.
Go-Go 5 sort of ends up having the same problem with Kinga Man, but it ends up redeeming itself on the last arc.
End, yeah.
Because that last arc is pretty damn good. Like, when you get that family
and just aesthetically was better to look at.
Yeah. That family dynamic between, you know, the two families fighting against each other and everything, and then, you know, sort of coming together with Matoi and Zilfi's at the end, and having to fight against, you know, Sima's mother and her being such a explicit parallel to the Go-Go 5 member's mother. I really like the way they paralleled in this show. I think that's the thing that really set this one apart. Like, yeah, it has that beginning where you're just like,
now,
but it gets to there.
Yeah, but as a decade, it's not the best Sentai's offered, but it definitely has the most
change.
Yeah, good word. We have the start of the Sixth Ranger tradition. We have the start of kind of the regular team power-up tradition. Team ups. We have the first of those. We have the combining Megazord tradition kind of starting in this one.
Well, I mean, Live Man did it first. And then
I'm not saying they did it first, but like as a tradition.
Yeah.
It started in this one. And it gave us a lot of what the foundation is of Sentai is today.
It was just like each show, or at least a lot of them, were just so different from the one that came previous. It feels like, even though like the themes and the generalized story between something like, I don't know, maybe Tokucast and Ninja, but they still have a lot of similarities between the two shows themselves. But in this one, it just feels like each show felt like a just completely separate entity. Like going from Jetman to Z Ranger, what?
And going from then going from Z Ranger to Die Ranger.
What again?
So yeah, it was all a big transition. This was like a very transitional phase for Sentai.
They got rid of that main writer who did like basically every single show up to 5-Man. They got rid of him. They brought in new teams for basically each show. We ended up getting different stories and different characters and how they're presented. Like picture someone like Guy, who's Black Condor, with Goki from Mammoth Ranger from Z Ranger. That's two completely separate different Black Rangers, but they came right after each other because they're written by two separate people. Usually, from like going from Masked Man to Live Man, those archetypes are still sort of there. But I felt like they broke them and made them new things in the 90s just that much more. And I love it. I think that's one of the greatest things that the 90s really gave us. It gave us that feeling of difference, and that's amazing.
Yeah. Overall, I think it was a decent decade for Sentai. I come to the math. I think we liked 6 out of the 10 seasons.
Yeah.
So just enough to make a good overall decade. But this is just kind of turned into an abridged version of our reviews.
Yeah.
But
for the Decade Review series, it's basically just going to end up being every 10 years Showtime will end up doing this. So we're going to end up doing this from Kamen Rider from Kuga the Decade, and then from Sentai from Time Ranger to Gosei. So we'll end up
technically Time Ranger to Shinkenger. Gosei started in 2010, ended in 11. So
we'll end up doing so far. Of course, we only have 3 planned because there are only 3 decades that we can really do this for.
Yeah.
But I like the fact because it gives us that that ability to have that retrospect.
To look back to see where this decade started and where it ended.
Yeah.
And with the 90s. There was a lot of up and down, but I feel
there was a lot more toy sales. After O Ranger really had really bad ratings, but really good toy sales, you could see that shift. Like it went from focusing a lot more on the story to focusing a lot more on the toys. At least in some cases, you can really see that.
I mean, if you know your plot's going to be shit, go right ahead and go for focus on the toys. Because with O Ranger, they must have known it was a lost cause.
Yeah, just like I mentioned this in the 3 reviews: Cog Ranger, O Ranger, Car Ranger. We end up getting the separate mechs for each of them. We haven't gotten that since. At least not separate humanoid ones.
Oh, yeah.
We haven't gotten that since. I would like to see that come back.
Yeah, that would be nice.
I mean, don't do it for Q Ranger, because good lord, we would never be able to see anything on that screen ever. But, I would like...
Well, I mean, they have to get a secondary mech at some point. It could be humanoid.
They have that with Ho Phoenix.
True.
Yeah. But I would really like for the 42nd Sentai at this point to bring that back.
Possible.
Yeah, that would be a good thing to bring back. Like, some of the other things I would like for a good romance to be done, like in Jetman. Give everybody their own story, like in Die Ranger. Just bring back that ensemble cast, because it's like, everybody can be a part of the team, but it doesn't feel like they're all really working towards the same goal, or everybody, you can sort of tell they don't all really get along with each other. And unlike in Mega Ranger, because they all did there. And that really ends up showing in how the actors end up acting together. I think the 90s it's my personal favorite one, because once you get to the 2000s, you can see exactly how everything changed for that. Like from the 90s to the 2000s, there's such a gigantic shift, and it's weird how that happens. I mean, it's a good thing in some cases, but in other cases, you get things where, they stop doing in-suit acting for a lot of the for the Megazords being formed together, or they're not using like actual
suit actors. They're using CGI.
Yeah, it's just like I like a lot of the things in the 90s because they felt a little bit more genuine in their own cases. Like it doesn't feel nearly as computer generated as you start getting after God Ranger. But the 90s is still a really good one. I really like this decade for Sentai. I felt like it was a really strong one. Yeah, there were some missteps, but that's going to happen no matter what.
Yeah, nothing's perfect. But that has been our review of the decade of the 90s for Sentai. Let us know what you think of the show. If you like what we're doing, if you don't, because we always love your feedback.
Yeah. And as I said, it's going to be a while before we get to another one of these.
True enough. But thanks again for joining the Tokucast. We will see you guys next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.